In this week's episode, we're going to learn how a 25-cent washer can save you hundreds of dollars. Stick around. Hey, I'm Dino for Cheaper TV. Glad to see you here. You may have seen in this episode where we talked about how my wife purchased a 2012 Jeep Wrangler Sport. And in that episode, we talked about possible mods. And what we did was hard grab handles, fuel cap filler door, LED headlights, and larger tires. And the other mod that we still want to do is to put a touchscreen stereo with Apple CarPlay. But we'll have to save a little more money before we can get that. So all in all, we're pretty happy with the mods so far. There is a problem, however, with the larger tires. If you decide ever on your Jeep that you want to put on larger tires, depending on the tire, the diameter and the width of the tire, you could experience rubbing. And that's what we experienced with our Jeep when we put on our larger tires. Now there are a couple solutions for that. One solution to stop tires from rubbing on your control arms or wherever is to put on a budget boost, or like what I did here, the AEV 2-inch lift. That'll help lift the Jeep out of the way from the extending parts of the tire. But that is a solution that will set you back hundreds of dollars. Another solution is to have wheel spacers. Now the way they work is that you use the bolts on your rotor and you use them to bolt the spacer on, and then the spacer itself has some lug bolts that you bolt your tire onto that. Now that's a solution that still will set you back hundreds of dollars, and there are some people that say those aren't exactly the safest to use, and to make sure you always check on the torque of the bolts. So in trying to come up with a solution for this Jeep, I came across the idea of how you can use 25-cent washers as spacers between your wheel stop and the knuckle to keep your wheel from turning too far and stop it from rubbing. Let's get under the Jeep so you can see what I mean. So this little bolt or stop will touch against this part of the steering knuckle when you've got the steering turned all the way. Now I'm on the passenger side, so when you turn the wheel to the right, the stop bolt will hit the knuckle on the axle. And that's the limiter for your steering. Now this is set at stock, and what we're going to do is put in a washer right in here so it moves the head of the bolt out a bit, so it'll stop your steering for you before your tires rub. Let's take the bolt out. So that's what the bolt looks like on the JK. On the JL, it looks a little different in that you don't have this nut welded to the bolt, it's just one head. But this is what it looks like on the JK on both sides. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put a washer on the end of the bolt so that it pushes the head of the bolt out a bit. So there's my 25-cent washer. And I'm going to now put the bolt on and see how this helps stop the rubbing. Okay, so now I've done this on the passenger side. We'll go and do it on the driver's side and then get in the Jeep and test to see if the tires still rub when we crank the wheel all the way both to the left and the right. So I got into the Jeep and into the driveway, I cranked the wheel all the way to the left, and as I backed up I still could sense there was still some rubbing. It was better, but there was still some rubbing. I backed up the Jeep again, and this time I cranked the wheel to the right, and as I backed up I still could sense there was a little bit of rubbing. So in our case, we're going to have to insert an extra washer. Okay, so since we still have some rubbing, we're going to remove the bolt and put on a second washer. Now we have 2 washers on. So into the Jeep again we go, and we're going to back up the Jeep and crank the wheel hard to the left to see if there's any rubbing, and this time it was good. Now we're going to test the other side, so we'll get back up the driveway, and as we back out again, I'll crank the wheel to the right, and again we're good. And so for the size of our tires, 2 washers per tire did the trick, so that's about $1 worth of washers if you didn't have them already. And for those who feel that the downfall of this method is that you lose a bit of turning radius, it is really negligible in contrast to the hundreds of dollars you save. You know, that's one way to get more for your money so you can get more for your Jeep. So if I've saved hundreds of dollars, then I could use that to put towards the stereo. So I hope that you found that helpful. Now let's move on to our tip segment. Now for some cheaper Jeeper tips. One of the tips that I want to discuss with you in this week's tip segment is if you're finding that bolt difficult to remove, give it a spray with some liquid wrench. That is something that I've heard on the forums and online is a very good product. However, I didn't need to use it on mine, but subsequent to that tip, is once you're done, it wouldn't hurt to spray the area with some crown rust proofing. Another tip that I'd like to share is related to last week's video. In the video I mentioned that I chose to use a bolt and a wing nut to hold the shelf tightly in place, but I found it too cumbersome, and I found online a 5/16 inch Clevis pin. So here's a look at how it works, and I'll include a link in this description section as well as in last week's video. And of course, now let's hear what our subscribers have to say. And now for subscribers' tips. We have 2 subscriber tips this week, the first coming from our off-road recovery gear revisited video. Hey Cheaper Jeeper TV, one tip is I pack thick gloves in my air compressor bag so I can pack it away before it's cooled off completely. Signed, Austin. Hey Austin, great tip. That way it'll help avoid the uncomfortable situation where everybody's waiting for you. Thank you very much. And our last subscriber tip is from our cargo area attic storage swing away shelf video. Hey Cheaper Jeeper TV, you could even use it as a platform for a fire extinguisher, medical gear, recovery gear, etc. And it's out of the way and easy to access. Signed, Jesse. Hey Jesse, great idea. The possibilities are limitless. I recommend, however, if you're heading out on the trails, have the recovery gear accessible in the front with you, because you never know what kind of situation you'll be in where you won't be able to access the back. Thanks again. And if you have any ideas, please feel free to include them in the comment section below, because they may make it in a subsequent episode. Thank you very much. Hey, that's it for this week's episode of Cheaper Jeeper TV. I hope that you found it helpful, and if you did, remember to give this video a like and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and the alert bell so you'll be notified when our next video is released. Till the next time, I'm Dino for Cheaper Jeeper TV. Be well, stay safe, take care.